We will now reconvene from closed session. It is 8:16 p.m. One second. Okay.
I'm just double checking.
Oh.
Okay.
I already checked it once, I want to check it.
Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Wait.
What? Were we moving?
Do I hear a motion? Oh, wait a minute. Did I? Sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My bad. I'm sorry. You gotta jump ahead, way ahead. Never mind. I got it. Okay. If you withdraw your motion, we're gonna move. We are actually going to go to the pledge and invocation. My apologies. There. Kind of look down at item. So, okay. Yep, on it. Will you join with me for the pledge to the United States and the Texas flags, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. Okay, if you will please, I will be giving the invocation. If you please bow your heads. Loving Heavenly Father, we come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered together. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand as we seek the truth. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other to excellence. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and farther and to be best we can be. We ask this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. You may be seated. Okay, we will now go to item 5, action on closed session items. We'll start with A, action resulting from level 3 employee grievance. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. President, I move to deny the grievance of Mr. Harris, but to direct the superintendent to continue looking into the possibility of reassignment.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, call for the vote. Okay, thank you. Okay, there are no other further actions on closed session items. We'll go to item 6, public comments. The board will now hear those who wish to make comments and who have completed and returned the public comment participation request. This section will be conducted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act and board policy. Complaints and concerns for which other resolution channels are provided shall be directed through those channels. Ms. Thompson, do we have any?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. We will go to item 7, board workshop to discuss potential of a bond package. Presentation by Gallagher Construction, Huckabee Architectural Firm, and District Administration. Update by District Chief Financial Officer.
So, Mr. President, I'm going to ask that the board kind of move to the reserved areas. We'll pull the screen down and we'll turn it over to our guest that'll be presenting tonight.
Okay, we're going to start off with a presentation. I don't know, these gentlemen over here. Yeah, they're gonna do, give us a presentation.
Well, thank you for letting us be here, and thank you for your time doing this. Steve, Mr. Gallagher Construction, and Tim Barton, we had a chance to kind of do a little bit of a facility evaluation of the stadium, and so Tim will kind of share some insights on the condition of the stadium, and then we'll go over some potential costs of replacement and renovations.
Thanks, Steve. So as Steve mentioned, so we had a chance to actually go out and take a look at their existing Bulldog Stadium, and we kind of focused on several key issues. Tonight, I'm not going to focus on all of them. I just want to kind of hit some of the highlighted areas. One thing I will note that one of the biggest things we try to look at when we talk about the facility of this age is we want to make sure that the accessibility issues are dealt with, so that you have equal access to the facilities from various patrons and visitors to the site. I am happy to say that there weren't a lot of challenges in terms of your existing stadium, in terms of accommodating people in wheelchairs, other accessible means. There are some issues, but not as many as we would expect to see in a facility of this age. That's one of the good things. But I do want to kind of focus on some of what we saw, observed to be some of the more critical areas. I want to focus here, for example, on your walk surface condition. These are like some of the main surface areas, and the concrete bleachers that you have on both the home and the visitor side. And we notice a lot of challenging areas that are areas of concern that need to be addressed. Some of these you see here, of course, is the deterioration of the walking surface. And what that means is that typically when you're talking about a precast or a cast-in-place structural system, what they typically do is you'll have rebars kind of set about an inch and a half, sometimes even more, from the surface of the concrete. And because over time, because of the number of visitors that have been inside the stadium and going up and down the steps, as you can see, you see a lot of worn out areas where you get exposed rebar. And we know that the district has dealt with some of those challenges in the past by doing some patch and repair work. But keep in mind that those patch and repair works are temporary in nature. They don't have any choice but to be temporary in nature because of the way that the methodology, of course, of how we do the patch and repair. And so over time, they're going to continue to deteriorate and become an issue, as well as new areas will continue to become an issue because of the type of structure that you have out there with the concrete. It's just inherent in the system. We've observed some certain spots, like here you see this a board is covered up and actually an opening or a hole in the walking surface of those main bleachers. Of course, that's a challenge, and then we try to kind of document. You can see some of the worn out conditions. If I can get this light to work. Anyway, so the photos you see on the far end, that's kind of just a typical angle or picture that you would notice of the age and the wear and tear of the top layer of the bleacher, both the seating area as well as the walking area. And once again, I'll just restate that this is going to be an ongoing issue because it is a concrete structure that's exposed to the element, and regardless of how many times you patch and repair it, it's going to continue to come back. So I just want to kind of point that condition out. And another thing we saw, obviously there were several structural, I'm going to call them conditions because this is an open meeting, just so we can, for the sake of conversation. And what we've noticed that once again, because of the age of the facility and the type of structure that you have, there's a lot of exposed rebars. In some locations, you had what used to be the old home section seating, that's now the visitor side. The center section of those seats are actually, the seating area is actually about a half inch to an inch offline of the adjacent section. And what's happening is that means that this level is shifting different from this level, so you kind of get that. That's why you see a lot of, if you ever are on the visitor side and you're walking from the restroom and you're going back to your seating, sometimes the water might be coming on your head. Well, that's because of that misalignment and the missing expansion joint material, things like that. You get a lot of that both on the home side and the visitor side, which is indicative of a facility of this age. And once again, it's going to remain an issue because of the type of structure, because of where it is exposed to the element. You'll continue to see that. And once again, in the center photo, you see we made note of, once again, a hole in the walking surface out on the home side as well with exposed rebar. And we did observe a lot of areas, both on the columns, some of the raker beams, and underneath the bleachers, where some patching and repair, I guess, had taken place about 6 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. Those have already started to deteriorate again and need to be addressed. as well as some new areas that may not have been an issue when you first did your patch repair. And so those are starting to show themselves as well. Another big thing or area of concern that we saw that we wanted to make note of is the condition of your running track. If you ever go out there and take a look at it, you see a lot of bubbling in the running track surface because of water infiltrating from the bottom coming up. If there really is a trip hazard, we actually took a photo at the end of the running board on the visual side. You can actually lift up the track surface as you get ready to jump into the pit. And the other thing you'll notice too is that surface where the pit is, I want to kind of demonstrate this. So you have the surface of the running track is here, the surface of the pit is here. So it already has dropped down lower than the running track surface. And we've observed that, and as well as other locations where you can see the track surface is starting to come up, it's bubbling up because of water. It is an issue. And the other thing we made note of as well is that you have a 6-lane track, which of course is not indicative of if you want to host a UIL event, but just the overall condition of the track itself raised some eyebrows as you walk out there if you get a chance to take a look. Once again, you see some more photos, and we try to document just a handful of them, give you an idea. You can see missing track surfaces, cracks. These will be young, just hairline cracks. These are significant cracks in the surface. And the day we were out there doing our walkthrough, the coach actually had his students out there running on the track. This is exact track right here. And so obviously you can see that could create an issue with the child running on the track with some of the cracks and missing material. Like I say, some of the surface is not being on the same level anymore, things like that. But it is still a use of the shoe, you all know. Another thing I want to kind of just point out is that the facility has severe or significant drainage issues. We understand that the line that's run along Texas Street back to Fairmont is a much smaller storm line than it should be. And of course, as that water is being collected from your site and trying to go to that line, there's not enough capacity. There might be enough in your system, but by the time it gets to that city line and goes out to Fairmont, there's not enough capacity to take that water out fast enough. We've noticed, as you can see, this is a photo in front of the home side restroom. You can see the water stains at the bottom. That's because of the amount of water that's over time that continues to sit at that location because of some of the drainage challenges you have. And one of the things I also note when it comes to the bleachers, and I'll talk about the old home side that's now your visitor side, we observed that one of the surface areas right behind the main concourse that you're going up to the visitor side, the footboard is actually at a slope. And what it's doing is that it has created a ponding area. As you go up those main sets of stairs, it has created a little ponding area for water to sit because that surface is now sloping toward the exit, and so water is just standing there over time. So every time it rains, especially if you get a heavy amount of rain, that water is just going to sit there until it's able to eventually drain off or dissipate or what have you as the sun comes up. And so it's not only just in terms of drainage, in terms of the site, but it's also happening on the structure itself. Now, I know you guys aren't out there in the rain watching the football game, but if you ever go out there after a big rain, I would recommend just go up to that home side, which used to be the original home side, and just take a look at that condition. We also try to document what's happening underneath those home side bleachers. And one of the things that we found out with our field assessment was that underneath those old home side bleachers is actually where you have a hub for your technology that connects your campuses together. Well, we try to document what that space looked like. As you can see, it's being used for storage. The photo that you see on the far right, that's actually the door into which that extensive, very important technology equipment is kept. They actually have to remove the storage shelves and some of the other stuff that's in that area. They have to actually move it out of the way just to get in there to access that room. Then also, as I said, it's underneath is the old home side bleachers, which is having all this water issues, water coming into that space. Underneath it, the storage you can see on the floors. There's a lot of moisture infiltration from underneath those bleachers, and that's going into your technology area. It's normally what you would see that what we would call a more protected operations center. because it is kind of the redundancy in your campuses, so they can continue to talk to each other. That's normally placed in a different location, especially one that can be as compromised as this one. If I use a word that offends anybody, I'm sorry, I don't really know any other way to say it. But that was just one of the areas we talked about, or that's one of the areas we kind of, made note of, just the condition of that space. And there are several other spots out there as well, but I want to kind of give you a feel for kind of the condition. There are some challenges, and the only thing I would say to that is to keep in mind that this is a 50-year-old plus facility. You can patch and repair, you're going to continue to patch and repair. The lifespan of those patch and repair are going to keep getting shorter for the simple fact of the age of the facility, and every time it's a year older, you might do those things, but like with our body, once we pass 50, I don't care how many times you do certain things, if your body's just not going to heal as quickly as it normally will when you're in your 20s. Well, the same thing with a 50-year-old facility. No matter how many times you patch and repair, it's going to continue to have the same problem. I'm going to turn it over to Steve real quick, but I'm going to be here to answer any questions you have. But I just want to kind of give you a feel for some of the conditions. But we're going to talk about some other things later.
Thanks a lot. I need renovating myself. So Tim did a great job looking through the buildings and doing that assessment. He also, just to kind of give us a little bit of a perspective on how a track and new field and stadium could be situated. Obviously, we all know we're landlocked. And so he took Tarleton State's, excuse me, stated that they redid up in Tarleton State and brought it down here just to give us some perspective. Now, this is a lot larger of a, I'm just going to get up here because this pointer's not working, but this is a larger home side than what we would need. But it does give us, like I said, a perspective that we could potentially, this is seated for 16,000, I think. So we're looking at potentially a stadium that would seat about 10,000. So we would have room to kind of squeeze that in a little bit. So you have enough room to rebuild where you are. Obviously, there's several challenges that would need to be overcome, drainage being one of them, scheduling being another. But it does have a good view perspective on how it can be situated, just a little closer of a view there. So,
just real quick, Steve, what I would say to this too is just kind of the thought on this also is as a test fit exercise, that if the Porte ISD decided they wanted to move in the direction of rebuilding or replacing Bulldog Stadium, what could be done. We just want to kind of give you a sense that you could come in with a either similar seating capacity or even a little bit larger seating capacity than what you have now, as well as address your need for UIL, be able to host UIL, and what that impact would do on your existing site. And as you can see, we're actually able to maintain your existing field house building just south of the football stadium is now, as well as some of the other supporting buildings, some of the new infrastructure that are around. You can see that it would not impact a lot of the other critical buildings on that site. You can still do a replacement stadium at that location without having to find new land somewhere else. I just want to kind of give you a feel for that. Go ahead.
oh, great. You got it figured out. The other option would be to renovate. And so that's kind of the question. Do we renovate what we have, or do we look into replacing? And one of the ways, and Tim would need to take a little bit closer look at that, but one of the ways that you could potentially renovate the existing track and make it from 7 to 8 lanes is run an 8-lane runway along here, which we've seen it done, and it does meet UIL standard. It's not the most desirable condition, but there may be a possibility, although it gets really tight down here, to extend this or even move the track north a little bit. But to try to rebuild exactly what's on there is going to be a little challenge. That is a potential way to accommodate the 8-lane track.
And Steve, I would add to this one. So what's important to note about this, when you talk about what your potential new program could look like, if the idea of not getting the full 8-lane track, just trying to see what's the bare minimum we could do, that's kind of what this does. But as you can see, the challenge you have is that if you don't reposition the entire track to get the 8 lanes, you almost, let me put it this way, you almost have to reposition the entire track to get the 8 lanes, because where it sits at right now, it's too close to to that existing field house and your scoreboard, that you can't just add the extra 2 lanes in there, so you have to kind of reposition the track and the field portion of that. Now, the good thing is that on the previous slide that you saw, it involves eliminating the old home side bleachers altogether, which probably wouldn't be a bad thing considering the condition they're in. The other slide would show that you would still have to make some adjustments to it if you didn't just do a total tear down or rebuild. You still have to make some adjustments to the visitor side bleachers to accommodate the addition of just a straightaway track that you see on this image.
And if you read,
Hey, Jim,
Yes, ma'am.
just to clarify, that stadium is over 60.
60, okay.
Not, just so
yes, yes.
when you're talking about doing that, I don't know how we're qualified.
There you go. And so you know when you're at 60, it's definitely taking you longer to get out of bed.
I think Mr. Lawson said it was 58, last time I heard Mr. Lawson say something about
It
it.
was built before 60.
I think it's 65, actually.
And if we're all being honest, there are some things that still look good at 50 and 60-year-old. I think David Johnson's a good example of that, right? He still looks good at 60, but.
Carla Grammer's got a picture in his office of the home side, the old home side only, and when they built it originally with just the old home side.
Does it have the year, because apparently we're missing that information, right? Am I mistaken? We still are uncertain.
Well, trying to find the original document.
Right, yeah.
I have the last picture, I don't know if it does or
I'm not going to
No. So then the question becomes, how much? You know, how much would it be to renovate? How much would it be to replace? Y'all might have noticed the costs are starting to go up a little bit. So this is a graph of hot rolled coil steel, which is how we get our metal buildings and any kind of really steel, major steel structures. This is the graph, and this was actually done in December of 21. Need to get it updated, but this right here is $400, roughly $400 a ton. This is just right before 2021. And then as we progress, here we are in December of 2021, it was, well, it reached up to, what is that, 1,900? And at that time, it was $1,600 per ton. But if you think about everything, like even the ceiling grid, it's got steel components in it. Everything that has steel components, especially steel structures, that's where that has that huge impact. And so because of that, we've seen significant cost increase. There's historical increase, escalation is what we're seeing. So that's been a real challenge over the last 12 months, trying to project what the costs are going to be. As we know, whenever we decide to do a bond, whether it be May or November, we're not going to start that project right when a bond passes. There's design time that comes into play, and that's more time for cost to escalate. And so it's been extremely difficult for us to, as both architects and program managers, to try to project what the costs are going to be even a year from now when we were trying to do it a year ago. So this just kind of gives you a little bit more of a picture of on a percentage basis. Since we had a recession in 2008, costs kind of started to plateau in 2009 and 10, and then in 2011 they started to go back up. Since 2011, what we've seen just statewide is we see obviously construction projects here in this area as well as up in the Panhandle and the Metroplex or the Austin area. On average, statewide, it's been about a 1% per month increase on average. Some parts of the states a little less, some a little more, but even last year, we were at the beginning of last year, we were still seeing 1%. But then in July, I kind of messed up on the deal, but in July of 2021, we started seeing 1.5%. So in a matter of 6 months, we started already seeing a 0.5% additional escalation, and then after July, we started seeing a 2% per month cost escalation. So that's upwards of nearly 20%, from 10 to 12% per year cost escalation to upwards of 20% per year. We, in fact, with Huckabee, we do we work for a district up north where we're doing several prototype elementary schools. And a case in point is we just started a new elementary school that was exactly 18% more 10 months ago. The school was. So that kind of gives you a perspective of what we're up against in the way of budgeting. And this is on average, not, just building costs. So there are components to a stadium that might not have this drastic of an increase, but we have to consider that as we're considering a bond.
And Steve, I would recommend to do that. So it's not, just so everyone understands, it's not just, what's happening in some of those northern districts like, Dallas and Fort Worth. We're also trying to see those numbers kind of come this way as well, the whole Houston area. We have a district here that's pretty close to you guys where, as Steve talked about what happened up north, where, as part of their 2015 bond, we did elementary school for them, they built it in 2018. They came back and said they wanted to have that same exact elementary school done again because it's a fast-growing district, and the only change they wanted to make was instead of accommodating 800 students, they wanted to accommodate 1,000. All that meant was adding an extra 6 extra classrooms to the same exact design. No changes in terms of delivery method. It was both competitively sealed proposal bid instead of 2018. So this was like 2020 when they bid it out. It was already like a $12 million increase in that same exact school just with 6 classrooms. And just so we all understand, classrooms are some of the cheapest cost per square foot that you can do because there's not a lot to it. It's not like a science lab or an auditorium or a gymnasium. Classrooms, in terms of cost per square foot, is relatively cheap. And to see that kind of increase in 2 years in this area, as Steve said, it's not just what's happening up north Park, Texas, or West Texas. It's also made its way down here as well.
Yeah. The other issue that we're facing, of course, is delivery time. You guys have seen the car lots, and they're empty. And, it's difficult to get materials. We're what used to be about a 6 to 8 month time, or a 6 to 8 week time to get some materials. We're looking at even 14 months to get some steel packages, roofing materials, and those kinds of things. Hopefully these things, this gloom and doom, will kind of start to brighten up for us a little bit.
Has it not begun?
We haven't seen it yet. We're hoping that it will, but we haven't seen. Now, there are some things, we were having some plumbing material issues earlier in the year, or earlier last year, and we don't see that anymore, but now that's faded off for roofing materials. So it kind of depends on what's happening overseas and things of that nature that are just obviously completely out of our control. So the other thing that we're potentially up against is this May. Okay, so last November was the worst pass rate that this state has seen in terms of school bonds. That was due to, obviously, we had a presidential election, but it was also because a lot of the propositions were related to athletics. And so we only had a 54% pass rate, which is, like I said, the worst in the state. A lot of districts skipped. We also had very few bonds last November, but a lot of districts skipped November and are going to May. And because of that, we're going to see record highs of number of propositions going out for bonds in May. How does that affect us? Well, when you have construction companies, and engineers, and architect firms all of a sudden starting to design and bid out the same work for all these school districts, now you're fighting for trades, you're fighting for subcontractors, you're fighting for materials, and so potentially what we've seen in the past when you have that condition is you start to see costs rise back up, and longer delivery time, longer design time, because as we all know, we're short on labor right now too, just people in general to get out there and work.
Steve, you're painting a pretty dark picture.
I don't know.
My sense to say this, my question is sincerely, I'm not trying to be the negative answer, but why? If we're optimistic that these costs will come down, that if we're going to compete for labor, for materials, why are we doing this now? And I think you said your term was historical escalation on prices.
Mm-hmm.
Are other people building stadiums right now? I know they're building school buildings, but like,
yeah, oh yeah, for sure, because we're not slowing down. The growth's coming.
correct.
We've got people coming into this state left and right, and so because of that.
So whether the ones you're building are districts that are rapidly expanding, is that fair statement?
Both rural, because you have economy as well. You've got wind farms coming in, solar farms, and manufacturing plants coming in, even in the rural areas, and they're taking advantage of the economy that's bringing the 313 agreement. So it's literally statewide that we're seeing that, but there was some pent-up demand because people were afraid of last November. And so that's how come right now. And I know it is kind of gloomy and doomy, but at the same time, we need to just plan methodically and strategically so we know why we're doing what we're doing. Just to kind of touch on a few things, there's some upcoming legislation potentially. Now, there's always talk about legislation and bills and all those things, but there are some things that are going to be on the docket that could impact the way election cycles are run. And one of those is Governor Abbott issued an order or a potential bill regarding May and November elections. If you do a May election, then he's going to require a supermajority approval rate, both by the board and the taxpayers. And that's a challenge. But although if you do a November bond, that won't be the case. You can just do a regular majority. So what that's going to do is force everybody to do potentially November bonds, and their whole deal is to do November bonds. But that hasn't passed. It's not in law yet. But it's not yet. But timing is something to consider. So for sure, because you have those types of things coming up, you know, and while costs, I can't imagine that those costs are the cost escalation is sustainable. I just can't. We just don't. What we don't know is how long. So as we think through these things, these are just things we need to consider, because a lot of times, as soon as that bond passes, where's our new stadium? You know, where's our new building? And so we need to be aware as we're talking to the community and we're having our conversation with our constituents that we're educating them on these types of issues.
And Steve, to answer your question, that you're saying, why do this now? Well, a lot of it, and it's not just new, some of it is replacing, a necessity or what have you. But a lot of people are doing it now because, especially if they have the capacity and the ability to do these things right now, when we kind of have some idea of what costs are and where, what they're doing, if you have the capacity and ability to do it, they're taking advantage of that now because we don't know what's going to happen 5-10 years from down the road from there. I'll give you a perfect example, and I'm trying not to talk too much here. But perfect example. So when my very first high school I did, this was like in the mid to late 90s, and this was like a 3,000 square foot high school. It had an 800 seat auditorium, an open cafeteria concept. It had a practice gym, a gym, regular gym, competition gym, practice gym, 2-story high school. It had a separate, what we used to call a vocational building back then, but in the CTE lab, and a football field. That project in the mid-90s, mid to late 90s, was a $28 million high school. Well, we're not doing $28 million high school anymore. So a lot of people are saying, well, right now we have some idea of what's happening in 2022 and 2023, and if you have the capacity to do it, and you can get it at a certain price point, better than 10 years from now, 15 years from now, when that cost per square foot might be double or some crazy number. And so now you're having to get less scope in the future than you potentially can get now. That's one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of, and we're having those kind of honest conversations with our clients as well. If you have an opportunity to do full scope of what you're thinking of right now, yes, you might be taking a little hit in terms of the cost of it, but imagine what might happen 5 years from now. You probably have to be forced to deal with less, especially if you got kids coming to your community or you have a facility that's falling apart and you need to address it. It's going to tell you where you're going to be 10 years from now. At $50 million or whatever it is, might be $70 million.
There is some positive side, though. On the May docket, we're all going to vote and it'll be approved on a $40,000 tax exemption. So instead of getting the $25,000 homestead tax exemption that we all enjoy now it's going to be $40,000. So in other words, it will, from a dollar perspective, have a less of an impact on the tax for sure. That can have an impact adversely for the school district, but for the taxpayer, it's not going to be as burdensome because of that extra exemption. So then, based off that, and what we're seeing in the current cost environment is if we were to replace the stadium, just as Tim put on there, the construction costs on there would be around 46 to 47. This is a potential budget. It's not even an estimate, because in order for us to get an estimate, we gotta have a real program. So this is based off similar stadiums that we're doing and seeing around the state, and current construction costs. And then your soft costs, architect fee, engineering fee, we'll have structural engineering fee, of course, civil, all your drainage, all those ancillary costs, kind of like just like buying a house. You gotta pay your appraisal, your inspector, and your mortgage fees, and all the things go with tile insurance, movers, furniture, all that. And furniture does, and equipment, and scoreboard technology, that kind of stuff, it would be as part of this. So a potential total project cost would be around 55, 56. But then we need to consider what we think we're comfortable with on an escalation point. That's as of today. What do we think it will be whenever? It could be, to your point, if we wait a couple of years, it's perfect. But to Tim's point, what kind of value do we want to put on it? And your property values are going to grow as well, so your bonding capacity will grow. So it's all kind of relative from that perspective.
So Steve, you talking about escalation based on timeline. Can you just give us a rough estimate of what that would have cost, that 55 number would have been 3 years ago?
Well, it's just like what Tim said. I mean, you were probably about 30% less. We're probably about 30% more than we were. Now, the bulk of that 30% just happened last 12 months.
It's always fair to say it's gonna happen, you're not gonna get a 30%. It could happen, but you're not gonna get a 30% jump up 5 years now.
Hope me, surely not. It'd be crazy. But it's a nice time I bought a truck too. It was, a lot different than now, what they are now. But
We're talking materials. Obviously, the materials that were used to build our stadium 60 years ago, or less than 60 years. Are we talking materials that have longer lifespan, that have, is that factored into the cost of it? Or are we going off of similar materials, expecting it to last the same amount of time? How does that come into the cost?
Yeah, you'll still get kind of the same lifespan if you go back and replace with concrete versus steel, you're gonna get that pretty much the same kind of lifespan, 50 to 60 years. Even better depending on the quality of the construction, what have you. And just think about that. So you're getting, instead of 2-year period or 5-year period or 8-year period, you're talking 50, 60 years, as long as you're maintaining the facility correctly and all that you're buying it and not having to really, major significance to that facility.
What's the better material to go with, steel or concrete?
Because of kind of your location, concrete, and two reasons actually, not only because of that, but as Steve made it noted earlier, the cost of steel right now is just going crazy. Part of it was driven by the big, Amazon and Tesla plants that was being built in Texas. I mean, those guys are just grabbing up boy joists where they can, and so the cost of steel now, it started off with the structural steel joists, but it also translated to beams and plates and things like that. So in some of our designs, kind of like midstream of what, as we were seeing all that happening, we actually switched over from steel joists to going back to concrete structure as a way of kind of alleviating some of those issues of steel availability and the price point.
part of the other thing is addressing the drainage and the moisture problem.
Yes.
Because that's what's helped age this building even more, the moisture conditions. So the idea would be that this would help that. So, whereas if you were to renovate it, and this is completely redoing the existing bleachers and basically a new press box as well, new 8-lane track or a version of an 8-lane track like what we talked about, whatever could be sufficient, new bleacher seating, replace the press box, but then having a drainage allowance to address the drainage challenges that it already has. And so that would eventually help the longevity of
So
the
$3.5 million just for the water to go somewhere.
So like, when we had this presentation last month, they stated that it was a visual observation. So we asked them to do, I guess what I was led to believe is that a typical process, they would go and do more extensive testing, right? So did y'all do that testing to get to this analysis?
These are budgets, not estimates. They're budgets based off of what we're seeing in the current market right now. So we didn't do a destructive investigation.
Do we have anything analytically showing that, like, I guess for me, the big thing, like, convinced me that we need, obviously it's a wish, I would love my sons to grow up in a brand new stadium.
Yep.
Play in there, but it's, right now I have it as a wish, like, to me, to transfer it to like a necessity, you guys need to show me that it's unsafe. Certainly it's got wear and tear, I think a more accurate representation that it's, parts of that building are 65 years old, there's parts that are 10 to 12 years old, right? So, is it safe, in your estimate, is it safe, and
There are structural conditions that need to be addressed in short order.
You know,
Here I have the report that shows that as well, the more investigative report.
you can go out, you can x-ray the structural system of that building, and it's not gonna give you a timeline of when exactly it's gonna go out. It's just not gonna do that. But you can go out there yourself, and you can be a layperson, and you can see twisted beams, you can see gaps in between the walk path and the seating areas. You can see the patches that we all know, well, I guess most people in the room understand were done. You can see where those patches have already begun to deteriorate. They need to be addressed again. And that, you can just walk out there and see those types of things. I don't think anyone could say for certainty, and I know as an architect, I definitely wouldn't, and I don't think any structural engineer would put his license on the line as well, saying that he can give you an exact time and date that, hey, if you put 5 people on that thing, it's gonna fall. No, they're not gonna do that. I don't think we x-ray it or whatever. But just visually going out there and looking at it, and you looking up, walking around the facility, you can see it's more. These are more than just cosmetic things that we're talking about. If we were talking about you just need a fresh coat of paint and everything was fine, I mean, I wouldn't be here tonight, right? I wouldn't be here. But when I see handrails, when I see handrails that have already been patched and repaired, and here it is in 2022, and the concrete has already chipped away, or I go up there and like I said, if I walk underneath the home, I'm gonna keep calling it the home side, but it's the old home side bleachers, and I look up and I see that this seating area, it's like this. I mean, I'm not a structural engineer, but even I know that that's a problem. Or you walk underneath the actual home side and you see water coming down. I mean, it's not supposed to do that. Now, maybe on the aluminum bleacher side, yes, because you don't have the toe guard there and whatever. But on the concrete side, that thing should be a fully integrated system that water should not be dripping down on people's heads. And it's happening because, as I said, if you look at the walk path, keep in mind, so you got a sidewalk that the guys poured in front of your house, right? They got rebars in there, and you got the same base down, they put the little chairs, put the rebars down, they pour the concrete. So you got about, just on the sidewalk, you got about 1 inch to 1.5 inches of concrete before you see rebars. You can walk up and down that sidewalk for the next 20, 30 years and nothing will happen, right? It just won't happen. And eventually you'll have to replace it. You got bleachers that was done 65 years ago. 65 years ago, right?
I just don't know, I'm not sure it's exactly 65.
Oh, whatever it was, 50,
But
60
it's
years.
over 60, I'm telling you, it's
Over 60. Okay, so
over.
you have some bleachers out there that's over 60 years. Well, I'm gonna say over 50 because I feel better than that. That's over 50 years old. That you've had 5,000 people, 5 games a year going up and down, up and down, up and down for the last 50 years or however long it's been. Unlike that sidewalk in front of your house, it's going to wear out. I mean, it just is. Concrete, yes, it's a good, durable structure, but when you got 5,000, 8,000, 10,000, whatever it is, how many people are just walking up and down? It just happens. I mean,
Well, you guys reference Tarleton State, and so it seems to be like the college model, an Aggie, right? So it's more of a hybrid, where they're not doing it, they're not tearing down Cobb Field, they're adding on to it. Is that an option here, where we get takedown? I mean, obviously, the visitor side needs to be totally done away with.
So I'm, as the architect, I'm gonna say this. I'm not a big fan of one size fit all, right? I just don't believe that, because I think at the end of the day, if we do one size fit all, and you get in there, we're going to do something that you would not have done if it was your facility. So what we're saying, I'd rather sit down with you as Porte ISD, talk to your athletic directors, talk to your educational folks, talk to your superintendents, talk to your maintenance, and find out what your needs are, and let me program a stadium around that, and not just grab one off the shelf and say, here, this is yours. That's not going to do you any good, and it's not going to do me any good, because once you get in there, you're gonna say, well, that dumb architect, why did he do that? I wouldn't have done that in a million years. This was just a tested example, just kind of give you an idea. Can you do a new stadium on that site, or do you have to go buy or take land somewhere else, another 20 or 30 acres and build one? And all this is doing is just showing you that you have the land and capacity out there. If you want to do a 10,000 seats, if you want to do an 8,000 seats, then kind of what you have right now. Just, hey, let's just go, Mr. Architect, let's just go back with the same amount of seats that we have right now, but give me another 50, 60 years out of it. What does that look like? And we program it and design it basically what your needs are and not what someone else's needs were.
Tim,
Yes, ma'am.
forgive me if you all have already said this, but I didn't hear you say it. Have you actually gone from the ground, gutted one, brought it back up again in a situation like this? Or are we gonna be the first?
I actually have. We just done it for a district, up near the Austin area. Actually, they just won a state championship. They got a little money in, and so they wanted to do a replacement. They wanted to do a 1-for-1 replacement. So in other words, however many seats they had originally, they want to come back with the same amount. And the difference was that on that same site, when it was first designed, they had the orientation of the field was incorrectly, and so they wanted to correct it. So as long as they stayed on that same site and they didn't, they were seating 5,000, they couldn't all of a sudden seat 6,000. They got that state money, they kept the seating the same, and we did the same on the same exact site.
Are those initials L and T?
No.
And so did they have the same problem? Like, did you have to figure out how to make it fit because it was really not there to fit?
We had to stay within a parameter. They had existing softball and baseball fields on that same site. They had, the parking was where it was, an existing, city street, so they couldn't go outside of that line. They didn't want to go outside that line. So yeah, it had to go on that same exact site. The only difference was we changed the orient. We were able to change the orientation, but keep their field house exactly where it was, and did some work to it, renovated it, and left the other field, the other athletic field events exactly where they were, and just redid their stadium. And coach, used to be the coach, now he's at Cy-Fair. He actually sent me a picture of an aerial shot that they did at nighttime, and it's my screensaver. I love it. It's beautiful.
Can you take us back to the imagery y'all put related to us?
Tarleton's similar too. That was a very similar deal.
So on the budget side of things, I believe you asked last time we talked about it, about the foundation and how our foundation, the structural integrity of our foundation and building on top of it. So do we know if our foundation, other than the drainage issues, if our foundation is going to be sound for reconstruct on the same site?
So in terms of foundation, what you have out there right now, they're piers, right? So on the aluminum bleacher side, you have these little concrete piers. They're about 3 inches in diameter. They probably go down so far. So all that would have to come up because we would want to change the footprint of your stadium to make sure you've got the seating capacity you needed without going beyond Texas Street.
That's what I was going to say. The next thing was, I didn't see the cost for purchasing Texas Street, so.
No, we would try to stay within the boundaries that you have set. We don't want to just.
Okay.
And so I don't want anybody to think that this is what your stadium shows.
And this is larger than what you would want. It just shows you that we have the room.
And that's an 8-lane track.
That's an 8-lane
Yes.
track.
That indicates.
We talked a lot about on the UIL thing. How relevant is that? Like,
Stated on that 8-lane track, that y'all would have to possibly move it north a little bit.
Yeah.
How does that affect the football field in moving it north?
In the rebuild design, the entire field and track would be
Okay,
shifted.
I got it.
Yeah, just like this is shifted back to the north there.
So we're gonna rebuild the field again?
In this
In that
scenario.
scenario, yes, sir.
Yeah. Now, if you did something like that scenario, you wouldn't.
And Coach Thompson, you can help me with this, but Jeff asked the question, how relevant is it that we get an 8-lane track field? Well, right now, we don't host those kinds of things, and when our kids are running track, and they can certainly practice out there, but we really can't host any events, is that correct? Because we don't have a regulation track field. I mean, we want to be able to do those kinds of things for our students. We want to be able to host those kinds of events. and not just always have to have our kids go somewhere else to do those things.
We do host, but you have to adjust.
But you have to adjust. How do you adjust for that?
At the state meets it's 8-lane track.
How do you adjust for
With
that?
fees, yeah. We run sub-varsity
Gotcha.
and visual on it.
But what you want to do is you want to be able to make sure that you can hold a district track meet at LaPorte Stadium. Which
Yeah.
right now, if you all host district meets there at LaPorte Stadium.
University.
Yeah, JV.
So we go like,
Yeah.
It's a revenue generator,
Right.
potentially.
And like I said, those types of decisions would be part of the final programming. You know, it could be rebuild the stadium, and do a 6-lane track instead, or whatever. And we would definitely sit down and iron those kind of things out.
You know, let me just say, and tell me, y'all are not finished, and you're doing a good job. And I also want to just say, I didn't get a chance to kind of introduce them, but Mike introduced you guys. But, you know, what I've asked them to do is to come tonight and kind of do exactly what they're doing. Just lay out the possibilities, okay? We're not in a rush here. We know that. I've had some conversations with the board. We're not in a rush for this. But there are some needs, and we don't want to say that we can't have school because we don't have a new stadium. That's not what we're saying. But we are saying, in the future, we want our kids and the legacy that we're going to leave for our kids and our youngsters to have something that's even better than what we built 60 years ago. Because somebody decided to make those decisions a long time ago, and we're living through those, and we appreciate that. But there is a time that we're going to have to make some decisions on what's going to become of the next 60 years of LaPorte ISD and the students in our athletic. And I said, and I tried to be as compelling as I could, this is just not a football field and a track field. This is coaches and teachers' classroom. If I'm the track coach, that's my classroom. That's like me deciding I want to go get, or I need more chairs, I need more whatever. That is my classroom. So we're trying to expand upon that, and we want to make certain that the students that are coming in the future, the students that are already here, I mean, the kids that are 10th graders right now, if the board decided to do this tonight, would not get an opportunity to see this. Because it's going to take us 24 months to figure out all of these things. But the future of LaPorte is going to eventually be a part of this what I consider extended educational facility, because that's what it is. I don't want people to think we're just trying to get a football stadium, because there's too many other things that happen at that field. When we get ready to take 6,000 or 7,000 people together for Veterans Day, we don't take them to Bulldog Center. We get them on the football field, and everybody kind of gets out there and listens to the veterans and pay homage to all of those folks. Marching contests, all of those kinds of things. So I want to make sure that we try to start thinking of this as an extension of the classroom. Am I right, Coach Thompson? If you're an athletics person, this is where they hold class at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day. This is where they hold class. And so we can't just think of it as a Friday night venue. It's used every day, every day. If you go out there at 12 o'clock, I've been out there to see the kids at 11 and 12 o'clock in the afternoon. There are kids all over the place. Track kids in one place, football kids in another, soccer kids on another side of the field. It's a classroom. And so I want us to think in that way. And I think clearly there's a whole lot of money that the board, the elected trustees, have to make decisions about at some point. But we need to keep in mind, it's so important to think about it as if it was another classroom or another campus that we're building. This is where our kids will learn for the next 50 or 60 years. And none of us will be here at that time. But you will have made decisions one way or the other, whether we repair or we totally replace. One way or the other, what we're doing, we're going to have to make decisions about. I plan to be here a long time. I don't want to be here in 5 more years saying that we're going to repair it again, though. That's what I don't want to do with taxpayer dollars and with your time.
And to Dr. Jackson's point, like some of those stadiums, they are community places. Even with the press box, for example, we see some districts that are incorporating large meeting or gathering areas actually within the press box area. There's an opportunity to introduce the whole idea of a true concourse or community concourse in this facility. Right now, you don't have that. There's people standing outside the fence, and you don't really have a true concourse area at this stadium.
I have a question. I'm not a construction person as far as materials and things like that, but
being that this stadium is so close to the Gulf, obviously it gets a lot more, salt water and all that, which just accelerates the degradation, as opposed to just, general weather element. Is there, if we build new, is there materials out there, something to help minimize some of that exposure to the salt water, or the way you construct the stadium or something that would kind of minimize that a little bit for future years?
Yes, there's all types of, with a concrete product, you got different types of sealers and what have you put on there. Even if you can get an aluminum bleacher system, kind of similar to what you have now, there's also sealers, pre-treated sealers that they can put on those to kind of give it that extended or expanded lifespan cycle as well.
Yeah.
This is kind of your, sorry, I was gonna say, this is kind of your hybrid, and this can go up or down in terms of the level of renovation and what we want to do. If you want to just replace the press box and some of the bleachers, then we can do that. Take care of the most structurally challenged areas and address those. But this is that hybrid part. Now, this is where we need to, as Tim says, we need to get in a room and kind of decide what we want, because this is y'all's venue, whether it be a classroom or community space, it's y'all's. So we need to sit down with you guys and start to figure out what it is you want to do. But this gives us an idea of the cost differential between replacement and renovation. The other potential option is just to patch the hole, paint the handrail. When you do that, you're not expanding the lifespan. You're still going to have to go back and patch the hole and paint the handrail. So this is more of a renovation.
What's your estimate, like, we were doing a brand new stadium here in the Gulf, and right by the bay, what is y'all's estimated shelf life for a new stadium?
So like Tim said, you're looking another 60, 70 years,
They're doing stadiums all around the Gulf, Corpus Christi, you name it. They're doing new stadiums all around Southwater, and they're, Southwater area, big Gulf areas, and they're getting that same life cycle.
Technology's changed just over the years, on materials and sealants and protective. So the buildings can be built to last longer. One of the things, though, that we need to be thinking about too, as we talked about, is time. Is when we can decide what we want to do, but also when we want to do it, because that's going to have a pretty big impact on the cost, regardless of which option you choose. So just kind of give us a little bit of an idea of timeline. Design takes anywhere between 8 to 10 months. And so that includes structural engineers, civil engineer, aggressive drainage, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, the construction documents. And then, so if you did let's say if you did a May 22 bond, which is really almost, it's not too late. The latest day to call for a May bond, as you guys probably know, is February the 18th. We would be able to start that project potentially in March of 2023. If you did a November 2022 bond, you would start it in the fall of 2023. So basically 6 to 8 months later. What that means, if you did a May bond, depending on what we want to use as an escalation factor, and this is really up for truly discussion. Where it comes in, at the end of the day, we can, if we did what we're experiencing now is about 2% per month. If we extended it out to the time we were going to start it would be about $10 million more. Is it really going to be that? Hopefully not, surely not. But then what number do we want to use? If we use $2 million and it comes in at 5 over, well then we make tougher decisions. If we use this number, then we make different decisions. It's more protective coating. It's whatever it might be. But this is what we have to be comfortable with. What we don't want to do is promise the community that we're going to do something and not be able to do it because it was over budget. If it comes in under budget, it's the district's money to use towards that. But this is something we got to be very careful of because we don't know what those costs are going to be. My hope, and surely it's not going to be that, but it's going to be something. We know that. If you did a November bond based off these schedules, it would be, in that case, 2% per month. almost $16 million more. I really don't think that would be the case, but this is based off the last 10 months. Hopefully it'll change. Now, there is something to consider on that, is if we feel like May is too rushed, if we feel like we still need to do some, just more programming and seeing how we want to do it, spend some more time on design and ideas and thoughts, and have Tim and his team kind of get together and start to develop some programming, then you could potentially, and this is just a consideration, but to save some of that cost and some time, you could start the design process early. If you decided to do a November bond, you could deploy your architects to start the design process so that when that bond passes, it's already ready, almost ready to bid by the time it goes. So in other words, you're not waiting a whole other 8 to 10 months after November. In that case, the cost escalation would be, that's the lesser, hopefully it wouldn't even be that much, but it would be the most economical way to do it. So that would mean your design will be completely start the soonest that way. So that is, and we've been doing a lot of that, especially in the fast growth types of districts, because they don't have the time. They're growing too fast, they don't have the time to do that. But then we've been doing it with other districts for the cost factor. So it is the risk that you take is that if the bond fails, then you're paying the architect to do that. Although you've got a tangible asset, you've got the drawings, you're not going to not build the stadium there at some point or renovate or whatever you decide to do. So you do have a tangible asset to offset that. But it is an upfront cost to the district that gets reimbursed. You do a reimbursement resolution basically. It gets reimbursed once the bond passes. So that's just a thought or a consideration to help manage. The other side of this is it's a little bit more predictable when we're gauging 8 months out on cost escalation versus 24 months out, obviously, as we all know. So.
Questions, board? Questions for anybody? I've had some conversations with the board and we just wanted you guys to come out tonight and kind of lay out what this all looks like. And so we'll continue having those conversations. All right? All right. Any questions for these guys, board? Any questions for me?
Thanks for letting us come out.
I'm going to ask, if you don't mind, Mr. President, that Rhonda just come and kind of share just one more time some financials so that we can kind of frame some of this, and then it's your meeting.
Okay, what I have is real brief. I'm just going to go over again the numbers for what it's going to do to the tax rate. So now with these numbers he's given us, I can go back and get more up-to-date numbers. But the numbers we had were, remember, 65 million and 130 million. 65 million, assuming no growth in tax base, keeps our tax level. 3.5 cents if it's 130 million, assuming no growth in tax base. Now, it's an increase either way because we're selling bonds. So it's going to be on the ballot as an increase, right? Because we're selling bonds. But also keep in mind that we're in compression. And so far, if our tax base goes up, our compression is usually lower, which lowers our M&O rate, so our overall rate may not change. But our debt service rate would change if we did over 65 million. Maybe not if we had some big tax growth, but I could get numbers based on the 29 million and 55 million and bring back to you possibly at the next board meeting if you want me to?
Well, next week, yeah.
Yeah, next Tuesday.
So Rhonda, would you, or could you, and maybe you'll have to kind of look this up, and work on it, but could you speak to what Jeff said earlier, Steve said, excuse me, earlier, about the potential law that's on the legislative books?
$40,000.
The 40,000, for taxpayers, because, one of our concerns is always
Oh, yes,
taxpayers.
homestead.
Yeah, our homestead exemption.
But also.
Because always our taxpayers are concerned, and that's what we're trying to
We
do.
have a gubernatorial election coming up as
Yes.
well, and Abbott's running over that he still wants to lower property
Right.
tax. And that money's gotta come from somewhere, but if he lowers property tax, that will affect, I'm guessing it'll be compression too. So, 40,000, so it all depends on how they do school finance, because if you recall, when we do the optional homestead exemption. So there's 25,000, I think, from the state. We do the optional. We're recaptured on that optional. So we can't tax it, but we're recaptured on it. If that makes sense. So if they go to 40.
It makes real good sense. Makes me angry.
Yeah, it doesn't hardly seem, well, I guess what they're trying to do is take away local control where you can't do the local homestead exemption without having some kind of penalty associated. Correct. But I don't know. Any other questions?
Board, thank you.
You're welcome. And I will have numbers based on some of the numbers they gave us today. Next week. Thank you.
And so we'll get an opportunity, thank you, Rhonda, we'll get an opportunity to share this information. We have a bond steering committee, and we will get an opportunity to share this information with our bond steering committee as well. But board, I just want you to continue to give me your direction on what your recommendations are for me. We've had some quiet conversations about, what I think and what we think together collectively. And so just give me some direction on that. What I will also remind everybody of is we also have, in addition to what we talked about tonight, we're still dealing with the things that need to happen on our campuses, right? So there are some items that we talked about, that's some big ticket items and some maintenance and operations things. And so I don't want us to forget about that, because this was one piece of a bond, a potential bond. But there's a whole other side of that are some must needs, in my opinion. Okay, and I know that's not proper English, but those are some needs. That's biblical talk. I must needs. Right? Y'all know where that comes from. I must needs. But my point is, we've got some things that we're going to just have to have some conversations about and make some decisions on, because there are some things that perhaps can wait, Mr. President, Madam Vice President, and Board of Trustees. There are some other things that may not be able to wait, and we may not be able to kick the can down the road too much further down, because there are some things that must happen at some point in order for us to continue to operate as efficiently as we have tried to operate in this school district. And I'm literally following the paradigm and the protocols that have been set in this district that have worked for a very long time. Okay, so we will continue to have these conversations, and we'll put some things on the board agenda for next week so that we can continue to have these conversations.
Board, do you have any questions for?
You know I do.
Yes, sir.
Jeff or me? So if we could possibly get an estimate of cost of design, since there is an option for the accelerated version, that way we would know what we would be out should we not pass the bond, that would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah. All right. We'll work on that. Can we have that for next week?
Yep.
Okay.
I have one more question too. So
Sure.
I know it's, in the past this would not make sense, but because the laws are different, where they have to itemize out essentially, right? So this stadium would be itemized out from the other things we want. Is it possible, not that we do this, but could we call for a bond in May on the, I call it the educational side, the M&O, like the maintenance side, and the chillers and things like that, that I think have a pretty high likelihood to get it passed, and we spend more time and maybe call for the stadium in November? Is that a possibility? Would that make any sense?
It's a lot of work.
I mean,
But it's not out of the question, and so, no, it's not out of the question. I'd have to certainly do some more work on, yes, to answer your question, yes. You can do it. Here's my thought, and here's my thought. I know I'm a little long-winded on this, but believe it or not, a lot of things that we talked about tonight there's a whole population of folks whose kids are involved in those things who oftentimes help to push a bond and help it to pass. Band mamas, soccer mamas, tennis mamas, football mamas, and I'm using mamas but daddies too, uncles, aunts, grandparents, right? Those people, when they want something like that, they fight for it. When they don't want it, clearly they fight against it. But it's all about how. One of the things that we have discussed administratively is polling our community, because there's a poll that you can send to your community just to get a quick, idea of what people are thinking. And folks will pretty much tell you what they think,
Problem is that the people that tell you what they want, don't want to vote our time. We have a abysmally low, voter turnout rate. And typically it's not the parents of the athletes and kids that will be supporting the stadium.
But to answer your question, Jeff, yes, that could happen. That could happen.
Regardless, it's two separate it's two separate bonds.
Either way,
On
it's
the ballot.
Two separate ballots.
yes, two separate referenda.
By law, no matter what number it's going to say is the tax increase.
Right. Doesn't matter whether it is or not, we have to say it. Okay. Any other questions for me, board?
No, sir.
Ms. President?
Well, board, if there's no more questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn at 9:26 p.m.